Consternation today at a soccer game in Istanbul when Turkey squared off in what they call a friendly with Greece. This was supposed to be a moment of silence to remember the victims here in Paris when this happened. That's a series of boos, and local reporting inside the stadium say they were followed by chants of Allah Akbar, or God is great.
A former member of al-Qaeda in Yemen, who was once so entrenched in terror he was trusted with finding Anwar al-Awlaki a wife, says not only does he think the U.S. is likely next on the list, but that an attack on American soil is likely to unfold over the next 2 weeks. Morton Storm is a one-time terrorist turned CIA double agent. He is co-author of Agent Storm, My Life Inside al-Qaeda and the CIA. Morton, thank you for being here. Why do you put such a specific time frame on it, 2 weeks?
I do it because the people that who are on the run at the moment from ISIS in Europe are very desperate, and they know that time is up, and they will need to do as much damage as possible. And for that, I believe that within the next 2 weeks, that we will have an attack in Europe again. We've just seen in Germany now, in Hanover, that there is a very strong evidence that that the German authorities have stopped the terrorist attack. So it's quite severe in Europe now, and I also believe that copycats in America will do the best to do what their brothers have done in Europe.
Because I know you believe that, and you've worked with them, you know these people, that if in their minds America is the real trophy.
Yeah, you know, when I infiltrated these people, you need to understand their mind. You need to understand, you know, the mentality of them. How do they think? In order to predict what you want to do, and that was my success in my work. You know, I was one of the best. So that's why I am saying quite confidently that I believe that something within the next 2 weeks will happen.
Could they do something, in your view, as coordinated here in the States as we saw in Paris?
You see, it's a bit different from over there, because your borders are quite more tight, but you have also a lot of weapons like handguns and machine guns that people can get hold of, and we have seen that before, that you will have lone wolf attacking, you know, the barracks from the army and other places. But I think this time they could also target target the civilians, such in, you know, shopping malls or other places like we have seen in France.
How conscious do you think they are of the fact that we're going into a holiday season here in America that happens to be a religious holiday for many millions?
Yeah, but that's what they want. This is terrorism. So the terrorists wants to scare, want to make people afraid to live a normal life. So what they do is to terrorize them mentally, so they're too afraid to go outside. You know, Prophet Muhammad said in a hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari, in this one here, he said that I was made victorious by terror. This is the hadith, this is the sayings of Prophet Muhammad, which 99% of all Sunni Muslims follow. So he said in this book here, I have been made victorious by terror. So what it means is he terrorized his enemies, so he was scared, even if the enemies were not there, but they were just scared of him.
There's no thought whatsoever. They don't follow any conventional battle lines. There's no women and children exception. They go shoot up anybody.
Yes, I will quote from here, because I do not want people to think that I am saying something from my own mind. In this book here, Sahih al-Bukhari, hadith number 3012, it's book of jihad, it says that it is permissible, if it serves the cause, to kill women, children and babies.
Is this radical Islam? Is that what you're talking about, radical Islam?
No, you know, this is fundamentalistic. This is literally in the book. This is in the book. So this is not me saying it or somebody else. This is Prophet Muhammad, who ordered that, and said it's permissible to kill civilians, even children and babies, if you justify the cause.
I mean, Morton, how is civilization supposed to combat a group like that?
See, that's what I'm trying to call for, a reformation of Islam. Islam needs to be reformed. As Islam is today, it's violent, it's intolerant, and very dangerous for the whole world. It's a supremacist, ideology which had the aim of being totalitarian, like taking over the world. I mean, let me just quote something from the Quran here. This is Surah number 8 Al-Anfal, verses 39, and it says, "And fight them until there is no more fitna," means disbelief or other religion, other besides Allah, and the religion alone will be for Allah. So in Islam, in the Quran, Allah encouraged the Muslims to keep on fighting until there are no religion left. That means everything is wiped out.
Every non-Muslim is an infidel, and every non-Muslim needs to be eliminated.
So I do not understand. I do not understand how we make peace with these people as long as they believe in this.
Morton, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
And this is a Fox News alert tonight. In the wake of the deadly terror attacks in Paris, the 2016 Democratic presidential candidates are squaring off in their second debate. So what are they saying about their plans to defeat ISIS? Joining us live tonight from Des Moines, Iowa, our own Ed Henry. Ed.
Good to see you, Sean. It's interesting because in the first 20 minutes or so of this debate here in Iowa, Hillary Clinton very much on defense about ISIS, in part because of large part because of the Paris terror attacks. At one point, she said, "I do not believe we're at war with radical Islam." The reaction to that online and overnight will be very interesting. She also at one point was trying to break with President Obama by saying, "I do not think that ISIS can be contained," a rebuke of what the president told ABC News just yesterday before the attacks. But then she went on to sort of agree with the president that America cannot take the lead in this, that we have to have our allies in the Mideast take the lead. She said at one point, quote, "This is not America's fight." Interesting, because fellow Democrat Martin O'Malley really objected to that and said, "I disagree with Secretary Clinton. This is America's fight. We can't do it alone, but this is America's fight." Another interesting moment was when Bernie Sanders, a Democratic Socialist senator, was pressed on what he had said in the first debate in Vegas, that he believes climate change is our biggest national security threat. John Dickerson from CBS News, the lead moderator, who's done a really good job of contrasting the records but staying to substance, not just making it a food fight, pressed him and said, "Senator Sanders, are you still believing that climate change is the biggest national security threat, even after Paris and what happened just yesterday?" And Bernie Sanders said, "Yes, absolutely. This is our biggest national security threat." And he said it's directly tied to terror. So some pretty interesting moments. Secretary Clinton on defense throughout this debate, Sean.
All right, Ed Henry, thanks so much for being with us. The 2016 Republican presidential candidates have also been commenting on the attacks in Paris. And here's what Donald Trump said earlier today.
When you look at what happened in that case, it was just reported, one from Syria. Our president wants to take in 250,000 from Syria. No, I mean, think of it, 250,000 people. When you look at Paris, the toughest gun laws in the world, Paris. Nobody had guns but the bad guys. You can say what you want, but if they had guns, if our people had guns, if they were allowed to carry, it would have been a much, much different situation.
Now, many of the other candidates have also come out against the attacks and offered support to the French people. Here now tonight with reaction, the author of the brand new book, Duplicity, former Speaker of the House, Fox News contributor, Newt Gingrich is back with us. It's almost breathtaking, Mr. Speaker. 2 hours before the attack, the president is saying that ISIS is contained. Remember, it wasn't long ago he was referring to them as the JV team. Meanwhile, they've taken over cities that we won in Iraq. And then Hillary Clinton during the debate tonight saying that I don't think we are at war with radical Islam, and Bernie Sanders believing that climate change is a bigger national security threat than radical Islam. I mean, how out of touch can they be? How can they be so wrong so often? Thoughts?
Well, I was asked this the other night on a show, and I said, partly because they're nuts. And I think you have to understand, they believe in a fantasy world. That's a short answer. Yeah, but they believe in a fantasy world. I mean, the President of the United States may be the most dangerous president in national security terms in American history. He lives in a fantasy world. It's a fantasy world about Russia. It's a fantasy world about the Middle East. It's a fantasy world about Libya. I mean, it's a fantasy world about bringing unchecked, unverified, unvalidated Syrians in significant numbers to the United States. Hillary Clinton is part of the same fantasy world. And she was Secretary of State for 4 years. It is a disaster. And I think it's a great test to the American people whether or not you can watch this horror show in Paris and learn nothing from what just happened. Let me just say one thing. My very dear friend of mine, Bill Fortune, wrote a book last year called Days of Wrath, which I recommend to every American in the light of Paris. Days of Wrath is about an Islamic assault on American schools and the fact that gun-free zones are terrific unless you have terrorists. And then you just create a slaughtering zone. People need to look at what happened in Paris and ask themselves, what actions do we take this coming week, not in 5 years, this coming week, to recognize how dangerous this is?
Mr. Speaker, I got to wonder, have we not learned anything from 9/11, the 9/11 Commission report saying they are at war with us, we are not at war with them? And this president, it's almost pathological, his inability to say radical Islamic terrorists. You know, him clinging to these ridiculous notions that Fort Hood was an instance of workplace violence as Major Hassan killed all of these people shouting Allahu Akbar, or calling them man-caused disasters or overseas contingency operations. Add to that the Iranian deal, which is, in my mind, may turn out to be worse than Munich 1938.
Look, I think it may well be, and may be much more dangerous than Munich was, and Munich started the Second World War, so it was a nightmare. But I gave a speech in early 2003 and said that the State Department was fundamentally failing to serve the United States. All of that, everything I said over a decade ago is still true. What you have is an establishment worldview personified by Obama, but he's not the heart of it. There's an entire worldview on our campuses, in many of our newsrooms, in the State Department, that basically is not prepared to deal with how hard the world is going to be. We have real enemies. Those enemies are quite prepared to cut off your head. If they get a nuclear weapon, they're going to use it. We temporarily now have a moment to say to ourselves, what are we going to do? And I'll give you just one example for the U.S. Congress. They should move this coming week to cut off all funding for any Syrian refugee to come to the United States. We have no reason to believe that we can vet these people, that we know who are the terrorists and who aren't the terrorists. And it is madness. It's suicidal for a country to pay to bring its own enemies into its own bosom.
We would be basically duplicating the same mistakes that France made that I would argue probably led to what happened yesterday in France.
Sure.
You know, I think about evil in our time and a president that referred to them the JV team, and you know, and then we got to now look at the refugee crisis, the 2016 campaign. You know, the president now talking about 255,000 refugees from Syria, from Iraq, from elsewhere around the world, and then of course we still have wide open borders in a post 9/11 world. The immigration was already a huge issue in this campaign. What impact of what happened yesterday, the comments of Hillary and Bernie Sanders today, do you think all of this has on this race?
Well, look, it's going to be very, very polarizing. The fact is the Democrats cannot come to grips with the fact that we have active enemies. They can't come to grips with the fact, remember, this is the second major attack in Paris this year. The original attack on the magazine was this year. And we were all horrified, although the president wasn't moved enough to actually go to Paris. He issued another totally banal and pathetic statement last night where he could not bring himself to say who the enemy was. He could, but he talked in grand language about all of humanity. Baloney. Part of humanity wants to kill the other part of humanity. They prove it every single day. It's time to get real about the fact that our first goal has to be victory if we're ever going to get to peace.
Let me play for you. We all know the comments that the president made about Christianity and about the Crusades, and there's been a mass slaughter of Christians and Yazidis, and we have done little to help them. and the terrible deeds that he said were done in the name of Jesus Christ. And yet here, I want to go through a history, a montage of his comments about Islam, and I want you to give us your take of what the psychology is in his mind about not being able to say the words radical Islam. Listen to this.
The United States is not and will never be at war with Islam. And I'm also proud to carry with me the goodwill of the American people and a greeting of peace from Muslim communities in my country. Assalamu alaikum. Islam is not part of the problem in combating violent extremism. It is an important part of promoting peace. Our enemies respect no religious freedom. Al-Qaeda's cause is not Islam. It's a gross distortion of Islam. The future must not belong to those who slander the Prophet of Islam. ISIL is not Islamic. No religion condones the killing of innocents, and the vast majority of ISIL's victims have been Muslim. We have reaffirmed again and again that the United States is not and never will be at war with Islam. Islam teaches peace.
Add to that, Mr. Speaker, what Hillary said tonight, what Bernie Sanders tonight, and then how do you interpret their inability? It's not even a reluctance or resistance; it's a refusal.
Historians someday will look back and see this as almost a psychosis. This is a psychological problem. This is not an intellectual problem. If you want a stark comparison, look at President al-Sisi of Egypt, who is a practicing Muslim, by the way, and it's a bit much for an American president who is presumably Christian to be lecturing Muslims about what Islam is. Presumably they have some notion of their own religion. They don't need lectures from the American president. But look at what al-Sisi said, who is a practicing Muslim and who went to see the major imams at the Cairo University and lectured them ferociously and said, look, we're allowing ourselves to be isolated from the world by accepting a radical version which frightens everybody, and you have an obligation to fight it. Now, al-Sisi, as a practicing Muslim, understands vastly better than Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders what's at stake here, and it is a mutant version of Islam, but a very real version of Islam, which is prepared to kill people if they don't submit.